A couple of months ago, Vinod wrote a very provocative blog entry that says, sometime in the next 10 years or so, doctors as we know them today won't be needed. Now, core to Vinod's ever-controversial belief system is the intersection of mobile devices, advanced sensors, big data informatics, which leads us to believe as a firm that these devices are going to be the doctors of the future and be able to do a lot of the basic diagnostics that most doctors that you go see today will do and allow you to have constant monitoring of your health and well-being. So our next speaker, Dr. Daniel Kraft, is a Harvard and Stanford-educated physician scientist who chairs the medicines track for Singularity University. He's the executive director for FutureMed, a program which explores these types of convergent, exponentially developing technologies and the potential for biotechnologies in healthcare. What he's going to talk about really screams at the core of what we believe is going to happen over the next decade, which is a massive transformation of the healthcare system. Daniel recently founded Telemedicine, which is focused on enabling connected, data-driven, and integrated personalized medicine. He's also the inventor of Marrow Miner, an FDA-approved device for the minimally invasive harvest of bone marrow. And he also founded Regenerative Systems, a company developing technologies to enable adult stem cell-based regenerative therapies. So help me welcome Daniel Kraft, who's going to talk about FutureMed.
Thanks. It's an honor to be here. So in the next half hour, I'm going to cover a wide breadth of things. I've already apologized to our neighbor here, about where technology can take the future of health and medicine. And before I start, I think I'll actually start with a little story. This is Harriet. We met online. Not the way you're thinking. We were actually introduced by the co-founder of 23andMe, Linda Avey, who we both knew. And she introduced us because we happen to share the same type of mitochondrial DNA, a rare haplotype. It turns out we're also related to Ozzy the Iceman, so Ozzy, Harriet, and me. And this being the internet age, we of course started our own Facebook group for our haplotype. You're all welcome to join. And when I met Harriet for the first time in person, about a year later at the TED conference, she made our own happy haplotype t-shirts. So why am I telling you this little story? Well, it's a brief example of how pretty rapidly moving technologies can impact the future of actually health and medicine, from low-cost genomics, computational bioinformatics, social networking, and of course, being able to order t-shirts online. So I think there's several examples of how rapidly moving sort of exponential technologies are impacting the future. Of course, you're familiar with Moore's law. We tend to think linearly. If I took 30 linear steps, I'd be across the room. If I took 30 exponential steps, I'd be about 1 billion steps around the planet 8 times. And many of the technologies that everyone in the room is working on in different capacities are moving at interesting and often exponential rates, and are, in some cases, convergently impacting the ability to dramatically change the future of health and medicine. We also obviously have major challenges: the rising cost, the aging demographics. About 10,000 individuals turn 65 every day, the baby boomer generation. Access to care, we have 40 million uninsured. How we do medicine is very different. For example, back at MGH, where I did residency, than at Stanford, where I did fellowship. Why is that? We have very inefficient use of information. We're in the big data era. And often the care is fragmented, duplicative, and often fear-based in terms of running from the lawyers. And all this innovation that's going on is constrained by, obviously, regulatory and reimbursement arenas. So I had a chance to go a little bit back to the future. I was actually back at my home base of MGH, Mass General Hospital, last fall for the 200th anniversary of MGH. I had a reunion with my house staff. We always used to talk about, we used to walk both ways uphill in the snow. And I visited the Ether Dome, one of the historic sites in medicine where the first general anesthesia was performed. This is a place that really hasn't changed in 160 years. I wandered down the hall a little bit further to the ward where I did my first intern month, and that place hadn't really changed in over a decade either. Same bells were ringing, some of the same nurses, some of the same patients. And my reflection was there, even at a great institution like MGH, it was still very siloed. A lot of medicine is still done the way it's been done for over 150 years, divided by departments, siloed by academics, often being defined by body parts and ologies. And I think in this new era of exponential change, we have the chance and opportunity to redefine healthcare. One of the major shifts that needs to occur is that instead of spending 80% of our dollars on the 20% of the population with having chronic end-stage disease, is shifting the incentives to the left here and incentivizing change. As physicians now, we practice sort of fee-for-service medicine, not incentive, or not reimbursement, or actually, we practice reimbursement-based medicine, not evidence-based medicine. And as we start to have accountable care organizations and incentivize keeping people healthy with new ways and new technologies, that can dramatically change things. So my favorite example you're all aware of in your pockets of exponential change is that of the cell phone. We might remember when that was really cool, right? And now the mobile phone, there's more phones and toothbrushes in the world, is really becoming a healthcare device in many ways, from educational ways to porting data to physicians and patients in new realms. And it's really a unique platform which has huge opportunities, particularly now as these devices are being melded with diagnostics. Now, as Andrew mentioned, I've been chairing the medicine track in a new program called Singularity University. And that's how I've sort of had a purview of where technology is taking medicine. Singularity U is based at NASA Ames in Mountain View. And each summer we bring together about 100 very talented students from around the world. It was co-founded, by the way, by Peter Diamandis, who founded the X Prize, and Ray Kurzweil, known for the Singularity Engineer and many inventions. And the idea is to get people out of their silos, cross-training in medicine, biotech, robotics, AI, nano, space, energy, and leveraging these technologies to address major global challenges. Medicine was a big interest, and we haven't had a lot of time to focus on that in the summer or our one-week programs. So together with Robin Farman-Farmian, who's here, we started a program called FutureMed, bringing together physicians from different specialties, folks from IT, innovation, and beyond, to look at where technology can take medicine in new ways. And everyone gets to wear scrubs, even if you're not a doc. So the phone, again, is a major healthcare platform. There's 20,000 or more apps being developed on the different platforms that are out there, from ones that will help determine that a drug is not counterfeit to now integrated chips. For example, this is one that you can pee on, and it will test for STDs. It's only approved in France for some reason. And as these devices start to meld, particularly with diagnostics, Sunny Vu is here, one of the co-founders of Matrix. They've developed now, for example, the ability to integrate a glucometer with an iPhone or other mobile phones. And that's quite powerful, because now a patient with diabetes, for example, instead of just scribbling down their numbers and sharing that with their physician occasionally, can look at their trends, get insight into where their highs and lows are, start to adjust their medicines in new ways, have essentially a dashboard to their diabetes. And that has incredible power, this new feedback loop that's being enabled by mobile health. And these new layerings of information, mobile diagnostics, sensor bases, as we'll talk about further, are all going to be profound change makers in health and medicine. So let's look briefly at some different arenas in exponentials and how they're affecting healthcare. Well, number one, you're all aware in this room, the power of computer performance, which is not quite up to the level of uploading our brain or downloading it quite yet. But where exponential speed and computation is mostly impacting clinical medicine is that of imaging. We can now look inside the body in new, really powerful ways, whether that's appreciating a patient here with heart failure, or now layering PET scans, MRI, CT data, molecular diagnostics on top of each other to have new levels of insight. The ability now to do high-level reconstruction. This is my friend Mark's brain, who spent 3 hours in the MRI and about 2 weeks being reconstructed, now about down to 2 days. We can not only appreciate Mark's anatomy, but the cross-connections where there might be particular pathology. We're starting to learn how to reverse engineer the brain in new ways, develop data banks of neuroanatomy at the molecular level. And soon, as we're already doing, we can do fMRI, have a patient in the scanner, and allow them to look inside their brain in real time. And hopefully, instead of just giving, let's say, an antidepressant and waiting to see what will happen, we'll be able to look at the effects of different interventions in real time, whether that's meditation or medications. Now, one of the potential issues here, we can help a surgeon reconstruct a patient before a procedure, for example, or, and that's becoming quite profound. We can simulate ahead of time and practice surgeries using high-level imaging. The scanners themselves are getting smaller and more portable. There's even handheld-based X-ray devices that are being developed. But the challenge is these new imaging modalities are generating new amounts of huge data. The CT scans of today can still hold about 20 gigabytes of data. You can carry that on your CD-ROM between UCSF and Stanford, because they still don't talk to each other. But the scanners of tomorrow are going to be 1 terabyte or more data. How do we manage this big data era, how do we leverage that for good? Well, one opportunity is to change certain procedures. Anyone who here is 50 or older should have had their screening colonoscopy. Many people skip that for obvious reasons. Well, now we're in the era of virtual colonoscopy. You can be in a scanner for just a few minutes, reconstruct essentially your colon, and allow your colonoscopist or GI doc to actually fly through your scanner, leverage AI on top of that to maybe find a lesion that might have been missed otherwise. So that's virtual colonoscopy. Other fields are being disrupted, like interventional cardiology. So today, if you need an angiogram to look at the blood vessels of your heart, you'll go and you have a catheter, growing up your catheter, dye injected into your heart. Well, a new spin-out from Stanford called HeartFlow is now leveraging cloud-based technology and high-speed computing to take a scan of a heart, a rapid 3-minute CT scan of the heart, send it to the cloud, and reconstruct, in this case, the patient's coronary arteries and determine, are they narrowed or not? Do they need a stent? What kind of intervention would be most appropriate? And they can take what's called the FFR, the fractional free reserve, which used to be done, again, mechanically, and reproduce that computationally, actually much more accurately and faster, and see what an intervention like a particular stent, or which type of stent might be ideal for that patient. Other examples are changing the way we'll diagnose heart failure. Instead of a simple X-ray and ultrasound, new technologies can put someone in an MRI scanner for only 5 to 10 minutes and allow really elaborate reconstruction, far better than the standard ultrasound, to determine what intervention and personalize both diagnostics and therapy in new ways. Integrating new modalities is also an interesting possibility. For example, ultrasound, you're aware for diagnostics, but you can actually apply focused ultrasound to a very small lesion the size of a pea to apply heat, for example, to knock out a small tumor. Here it is in a test. You'll see a small lesion there, and that's now being integrated with real-time fMRI. So a patient, for example, with a fibroid or a tumor can be inside an fMRI while moving and apply focused ultrasound. So really the ultimate in non-invasive surgery. That's being applied to breast cancers and metastatic tumors as well. So a new integrated modality using integrated technologies. So obviously, the X-rays of the past are now moving digital. So are medical records. Though only about 30% of records are today digitized, the electronic medical record, EMR. But that's providing a huge opportunity to allow physicians and patients themselves to grasp what's happening with their data, to interpret that in new ways. The data can be streamed to the iPhone, while you're on the golf course, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, or otherwise. At Stanford, the medical students now all get an iPad their very first day of school. So that's clearly changing the next generation of digital natives as they emerge into a new era. The electronic medical EMRs are now being placed on mobile devices as well. So there's ability to access data and integrate that in new ways. And this is really a paradigm shift and the real opportunity to be disruptive and hopefully lower care and improve care at lower costs, which is really what the name of the game in healthcare. Biomedicine, IT, and wireless mobile combining in new powerful ways. And these new data streams, though, have to be interpreted. It's one thing to have the data, it's another thing to know what to do with it. So as we look at the trends in healthcare, from antibiotics to genomics and beyond, it's this sort of integration, I think, and many in the room might share the opinion that this can improve healthcare. My mobile stethoscope now has an app for it as well, so I'm not so good at listening to heart sounds anymore, but I can use an app to help with that. We have Dave Alberts, a physician and founder of AliveCore here, with the incredible AliveCore application that Vinod showed earlier. So not only can I check my EKG on my phone, that might be used by a triage nurse, or actually I used it the other day when an individual collapsed. I had 3 cardiologists around me who didn't know what to do, but we put this on his chest and were able to determine a little bit what was going on. So these can be incredibly useful in a variety of situations. CellScope, for example, can be leveraging mobile devices, a spin out from Berkeley, to not only look at, for example, the skin, but to look at the ear as a sort of a digital otoscope and hopefully save you a trip to the ER or the pediatrician. We heard from the founder of iNetra, mobile diagnostics for the eye in the developing world and elsewhere can bring smart diagnostics. And all this, for those of you who are Trekkies, is sort of coming down to the era of the tricorder. What used to be a $100,000 cart-based ultrasound is now about $5,000. And there's several versions of these. Actually, this new one has a button where you can go to Facebook directly with your ultrasound if you're at home with your new kids. So tricorder-based technology is integrating together. The challenge, again, as I mentioned, there's huge amounts of data streams coming at you. The physician, but we can't keep up with the literature, let alone all your data streams. How do we start to deal with this complexity? Well, I think many of you remember only about a year ago, sort of a seminal event when IBM's Watson beat the 2 reigning champions in Jeopardy. And while that was just a game show, IBM is actually applying AI now really directly to healthcare. I like to refer to it more as IA, intelligence augmentation. It doesn't sound as threatening for the physician. We're not going to be replaced quite yet, Vinod. But AI, I think, in healthcare is going to be really, really important. It's actually moving very quickly. They're already, IBM's partnering with WellPoint and others. And if you look at what they're doing, they're starting with sort of basic differential diagnosis skills, but it's going to move across the value chain, across diagnostics, decision support, care treatment protocols, repayment programs to really enhance individuals and systems across the way. So look for AI in healthcare in very important ways. It's already actually here in some ways for imaging. It's enhancing the way we can scan mammograms and pap smears. We heard from Max earlier about the ability to look at a lesion, let's say a mole you're worried about. Well, that can now be downloaded with a $2 app to look at a lesion, send that to the cloud, and with a pretty simple AI algorithm, determine whether it looks like it's nothing, maybe something, or something severe. You can then press a button and find the dermatologist near you for a follow-up. So that's mobile health with AI integration. And as I mentioned, the tricorder, actually just last January, Qualcomm, along with XPRIZE, announced a $10 million purse to develop sort of a tricorder-type home-based device that can essentially be better than a panel of board-certified physicians. So as these things are pushed to integrate, there'll be tremendous power, hopefully in lowering costs and improving outcomes. We're in the era already of telemedicine. Only about 20% of visits do you really require hands-on physician care. So telemedicine can be quite powerful. You don't need to have a fancy Cisco-based system in all cases. A lot can be done on simple Skype-type connections, or even on your mobile phone, or in some cases through telerobotics. I like to say that, it doesn't take a fancy system. You can use your, again, mobile device. Here I'm Skyping with my friend Jessica. She cut her head. I can take a look at that. She's not insured, so she sends me lots of photos, and I can help guide whether she needs sutures or not. And there are now startups leveraging press a button to speak to a physician directly through FaceTime technologies. Other low-cost technologies like the Microsoft Kinect, which has been a game changer in gaming, is being applied in many ways to healthcare. So not only can you do Dance Dance Revolution, you can now potentially do physical therapy in new ways and track a patient at home and optimize their therapy as they go downstream. Or maybe do an advanced neurologic exam for someone with Parkinson's or someone in a remote emergency room. In fact, these are being hacked in really, really interesting ways. For example, for the surgeon who might want to change their slides in the operating room without touching anything, they can now essentially use a Kinect in the next generations of imaging modalities. So smart ways of using low-cost technologies, whether it's IM or gaming platforms. So all this part of this disruption is moving healthcare from the traditional hospital and clinic outside. And there's a proliferation of new devices that are enabling this. Some are still based in the hospital. For example, this is a technology out of Israel called EarlySense. It's a small mattress-based sensor. It goes underneath your mattress. It can detect your heart rate and your respiratory rate and your movement without any wires. And that can alert a nurse or prevent those codes that we often have to run to outside of the intensive care unit. You can look at the trends in a patient and give early warnings. And I predict in the next decade you'll probably have these in your home Posturepedic mattress, monitoring your vital signs over weeks and months. There's a whole, again, proliferation of these sorts of devices, whether it's for asthma or for example, blood pressure. You can go to Best Buy now and buy iPhone or Android or Samsung-based blood pressure cuffs, which not only measure your blood pressure, but let you look at the trends. Have a feedback loop. Share that with your physician in powerful new ways. And that feedback loop, instead of just giving someone a medicine for blood pressure and seeing you back in 2 weeks or a month, can be very, very powerful. Or sleep apnea, a major problem. This is the way it's sort of done today, an expensive sleep lab. It's not always that predictive. Companies like Neurovisual are creating single-lead EEGs that can reconstruct the entire 12-lead EEG in new ways and give much more diagnostic power, not just for sleep, but for Alzheimer's and other neurologic type disorders far earlier than they would present clinically. And hopefully this will all enable, again, better care at lower cost. The consumer base has actually been pushing this in new ways. Many of you have maybe played with a Fitbit. It's a digital pedometer for watching your steps and calories and sharing that with your friends and colleagues. There's a whole new explosion of this. It's sort of been pushed by the local phenomena of the quantified self. And there's now obviously scales that will tweet your weight, inhalers that will report when you've used them, toothbrushes that will report how often your kids have brushed their teeth. These are all being connected in interesting ways. The challenge, though, is making sense of the data and making actually actionable information. And new startups are emerging that are looking at how to make this data, not just data, but actionable information. And the sensors, which are starting as simple streams, simple vital signs, are moving from sensors 1.0 to 3.0. We have the founder of Jawbone here, the Up device, has a lot of this sort of integration based in it, and smart dashboard type technology to integrate multiple modalities. Your camera on your computer now can measure vital signs in less intrusive ways. These are starting to be embedded in clothes, maybe implanted devices. Small wearable tattoos are emerging. This was just published in Science, conformal electronics. And where I like to sort of summarize where this can go is the idea of sort of the OnStar for the body. When you drive your sensored car, you don't care about what the temperatures in piston number 3. You care about what happens when the check engine light goes on, and then the advanced diagnostics can happen. Or if you, by the way, unfortunately have a crash, you can call 911. So I think we'll sort of see these integrated OnStar systems for the body. So you look in your mirror in the morning, it might give you a hint about what virus you picked up the night before. Or for those of you who are young parents, you might get special data. Yeah, so proud, number 1. All right. And looking in that mirror again can provide very powerful motivations for change. We know you're supposed to exercise more and eat less, but when you can look in the mirror and see the virtual you if you keep exercising, that can be very powerful. What happens if you don't if you stop smoking, or what happens if you spend too much time on Facebook? Those kind of powerful modalities, can be very powerful to sustain behavior change. So augmented reality. The visualizations don't have to be complex. We can take today's basic lab report, which is very boring and unenticing, and redesign that. That's what Thomas Getz and his team at Wire did for $10,000. They redesigned and represented that same data in a much more contextual, powerful way. And I think that sort of visualization, that dashboard of your data related to you, is going to be very powerful for improving prevention and keeping people in care. So some of these technologies, again, I hope as a clinician, will help us give us more time for patient-doctor relationship as opposed to less, because that's where hopefully things will go. Now, we want to reinvent healthcare. It's not just a matter of the technologies, it's a matter of a system. You can't just have great technology, you need to put them together. If you want to go from here to New York in 3 hours, you build potentially a jet fighter. And I have some experience in the world of aviation. I've been a pilot since college and a flight surgeon for about 12 years. With first an F-15 squadron on Cape Cod and now an F-16 squadron in Fresno. And there's a lot of lessons to take from the aviation world that can be applied to healthcare. One obvious one is that of checklists. Checklists are completely powerful in new ways. Atul Gawande, a surgeon at Harvard, showed that they could reduce mortality and morbidity about 30% or more just by applying simple checklists in the operating room. And there's new digital versions of these emerging as well. Simulation. We know that the accident rate has gone way down as the flying rate has gone way up. So you want your pilot to have been trained on every bird strike potential out there. You want your anesthesiologist or surgeon or other interventionalists, for example, to be highly trained. Simulation is enabling that in new ways. I was in D.C. last week. I visited the Cytel headquarters. They have a whole mock, a hospital essentially, where you can go through high-level simulations. It provides some interesting pictures as well. But simulation is really going to become more and more important. The analog cockpit with the round dials is converting to the digital cockpit of today. And what's important there is you can provide the data in much more contextualized form. So my fighter pilots use heads-up display. You see data. Can I have the sound up, please? The data is different if you're sort of in landing mode or if you're in dogfight mode. You need to know different things. And you also can hear things. There's something called Bitching Betty will talk to you if you're about to hit a mountain.
Cool.
Remind you of certain things. So you get different ways of contextualizing data. That can help in healthcare. Air traffic control, the idea that as a physician or a patient, you can see other patients like you, where they've been, what their trajectories have been, where the storms are enabling the triage nurses of today and the future to contextualize the information. Know there's influenza in this neighborhood and not another, and hopefully better guide therapy. Robotics is actually a technology that's moving relatively quickly. We've had robotic surgery for about 10 years now. Intuitive Surgical, for example, down in Mountain View. Intuitive Surgical and others are now layering technologies like augmented reality, so the surgeon can see where the tumor is through the liver, for example, or where the blood vessels are to avoid. They're doing remote mentoring. The surgical tools themselves are becoming more agile. So we're moving to an area called NOTES, natural orifice surgery, where you can go down the stomach, down the throat, out the stomach, and take out the gallbladder. So again, scarless surgery, all by sort of next generation laparoscopic robotic guided surgery. We can enhance the surgeon. How about enhancing the paraplegic, or the quadriplegic in this case? Technology out of my alma mater, Brown University, has developed BrainGate. Small chip on the motor cortex can now enable, for example, this individual who hasn't been able to move for several years to control, in this case, just a cursor with his mind alone, just by thought off of his motor cortex. This is back in 2006, and as some of you might have seen just last week, the first publication of 2 patients who are now just by thought alone able to control a complete robotic limb, and for example, in this case, give themselves a drink. Really powerful brain-computer interface technology. The challenge is that still requires a chip on the brain. We'd ideally like something a little less invasive. And we already have that, again, from the gaming world to some degree. Brain-computer interface devices are available for about $100. They're useful in a variety of modalities. Some might be, for example, in measuring the brain waves in someone who's an advanced meditator. And that's actually an app that's been developed to help advance meditation. Meditation is very good for your health. I might prescribe you an app for meditation as opposed to anti-anxiety drugs in the future. And apps and connectivity with BCI can help that. We can enhance brain-computer interaction with those who've lost limbs. This is Dean Kamen and the Luke Arm team's Luke Arm, and developed for DARPA, has 17 degrees of freedom, much more ability than the current prosthetics, which still harken back to the Korean War era. So integration is becoming increasingly important in connecting the brain and the body. If we look at patients who have not lost limbs, we're in this new era of exoskeletons. The gentleman on the right, I visited Exobionics in Berkeley. He hasn't walked in 2 years after a motorcycle accident. He's paraplegic. He can strap on this exoskeleton and now walk. These are the e-legs by Exobionics. Really powerful, both psychologically and in terms of rehab. And I think you'll see more and more of this sort of technology. In some cases, I predict that you'll be able to get out of bed in the morning, strap on your exoskeleton, and meander around even if you've had a stroke or muscle weakness. So the wheelchairs of the next generation. And hopefully, these sorts of technologies, as they integrate, will start to super-enable what used to be the disabled. Now, some trends are going in the wrong direction. Clearly, the obesity rate is in the wrong direction. But the trend in healthcare, at least technologies, is to get smaller, in some cases exponentially smaller. So devices are shrinking from accelerometers that used to be $100,000 and this big to $2 devices that fit in your mobile phone to enable health tracking. We now have the iPill, which is an integration of multiple technologies, a swallowable pill that can go through your GI tract and has a camera. It'll telemeter data as you move through your whole tract, and that both help with diagnosis and release of drugs at the appropriate point. So smaller technologies, exponential technologies coming together in new ways. Pacemakers are getting smaller and more powerful. So, for example, this one from Medtronic not only can be put in by a less trained cardiologist, but has an app which it speaks to. And it turns out that there are actually about 100,000 or more pacemakers now that have IP addresses. And the challenge is, you'll hear from Mark Goodman tomorrow, is what happens when I get a text saying, Daniel, time to go to the bank and take out $10,000, or we're going to turn off your pacemaker or turn on your pacemaker. So, safety concerns. Artificial retina is a whole slew of things getting smaller. I'm running a little slow on time, so I'll just show that these things are integrating together to potentially integrate Google or goggles through your contact lenses. You might have seen the news from about a month ago. There's Sergey wearing Google Glass. Imagine you have a heads-up display plus a GPS-type device for your health. It helps guide your trajectory like a car, but you don't want too much information again. You want just about the right information to help guide your health trajectory. You could be using that as an anesthesiologist, or again, if you're trying to lose weight, you could be looking at your meals in a different way and maybe have other cues. That was supposed to be the sound saying pull up. Yeah, there it goes. Pull up. So, new ways of seeing data. Lab on a chip. We're starting to integrate the world of microfluidics, the ability to take what used to be thousands of dollars of testing, integrate that on a small chip, and do that in a very very economic scale, and bring, again, essentially first world diagnostics to the developing world or any rural community through microfluidics. And that eventually, if you go down the rabbit hole completely to the small end, we're in the era of nanomedicine and small devices. So the last two trends I'll mention briefly are that of exponentially cheaper. When Vinod was building Sun, this is the cost of $3,400 for a 10 megabyte hard disk. Well, the equivalent for that, essentially in healthcare, has been that of the genome. We're now essentially 10 years out from the first sequence of the genome. It used $3 billion or more, about $1 million at least a couple years ago. This is falling at twice Moore's law rate. in terms of the ability to do a human sequence. It was $5,000 last summer. It was reported by Life Technologies at CES to be about $1,000 now, at least in costs per genome. And that's going to be quite powerful. We'll be very close to a $100 genome within a couple of years. And some of these are even doable on USB chips, at least certain elements of genomics. The power for this is to enable personalized medicine and hopefully do that in a very cost-effective way. Some of the early examples are taking, for example, your 23andMe data, $200 worth of genetic analysis, and looking at risks of certain diseases. For example, I've got about twice the risk of type 2 diabetes, so that might change my behavior mechanics. I think the lowest hanging fruit is pharmacogenetics, how your genes affect your development of how you handle, for example, alcohol or other drugs, and that can be very powerful to improve outcomes and therapeutics. Of course, it's not just your genomics. It's your it's your environment. It's what viruses you've been exposed to, the idea of geomedicine. All these things are now being exponentially cheaper and more accessible, from your genome, from your proteome, measuring your environmental data, biomarkers, even the ability to use essentially nanonoses to analyze your breath. The challenge, again, is how do we integrate all this in smart ways? Well, systems medicine or systems biology provides one potential way to do that, computationally combining some of this information in smart ways. So we can look at, let's say, 1,000 markers from your blood and see what healthy is versus diseased, hopefully picking up diseases earlier. And Lee Hood, the father of systems biology, has coined this combination, P4 medicine. We're going to know your genomics and other data so we can be more predictive about what you're likely to get. Then we can be preventative. That prevention can be personalized. And in this new era, it can start to be participatory. We're in the era now of patients like me, where patients with similar diseases are sharing data. Microsoft Health Vault and others are allowing people to share and combine data in new ways. There's a local fire department that's built an app where you can crowdsource response to patients who've collapsed down the mall. And we're learning by leveraging social data and behavioral change data, we can make big impacts. We heard from folks from Facebook earlier, clearly a major platform for social connectivity, but also healthcare in new ways. So you can see the social graph from the fun way, but we also can dive into that from the health perspective. And maybe you'll start getting SMSs like this, quite relevant to you based on who in your network has what kind of symptoms. Other examples of changing social constraints, Yelp is turning into Vitals.com, OpenTable, ZocDoc for making appointments, LinkedIn, Doximity. Combinations of prior Web 2.0 into healthcare. Gamification we just heard about from this, lately. Last piece I'll talk about is where we want to go with healthcare is to make it better. So not giving blood pressure meds at all. This is a catheter that can go in a single treatment and knock out the nerve supply from your kidneys, and in about 60% of cases cure chronic hypertension. Or a similar type of catheter applied for asthmatics to knock out chronic asthma. Single therapy, game changer. Targeted molecular oncology. I'm trained as an oncologist. Most of what we still give today is poison. We're starting to develop new targeted drugs that are going to be much more effective, particularly as we learn that many cancers are really thousands of cancers. And now we're entering an era of hopefully personalized oncology where every tumor is sequenced. We can understand some of the pathways involved. We can pick the right cocktail of drugs and personalize and give much more effective therapies downstream. I've recently started in telemedicine. The idea here is instead of taking multiple drugs that are not personalized to you and taking a whole pile of them, that you can integrate that with sort of 3D printing. Build your own personalized polypill with your name on it, with your combination of drugs to take essentially one pill and eventually print that at home and modify that on a daily basis based on your needs. Okay, my last minute, I still have a minute and a half, is the last area I focused a lot of my time on at Stanford, that of regenerative medicine. The idea to repair, replace, and regenerate tissues in new ways. And we all want the fountain of youth. We're just in the era of starting to use embryonic-derived stem cells, for example, in spinal cord injury, and that trial only started a year and a half ago. We've actually been using adult stem cells for 40 years in my clinical field of bone marrow transplantation, and that's being applied not just for bone marrow transplant, for cardiac therapy, diabetes, and other experimental modalities. The challenge there often is getting the bone marrow out, and I don't have time to describe it, but this is a device I invented to more rapidly harvest bone marrow in a less invasive way. But I'll close with where I think the exciting realm in regenerative medicine is the ability to take any cell in your body and reprogram it, sort of like a computer, using only 4 genes today to take a skin cell, for example, and turn it into your own personalized stem cell. These are called induced pluripotent stem cells. You can generate essentially a stem cell line of you, push that into any type of tissue, and potentially use that back on you, the patient. So in the future, just like we bank cord blood, I think we'll be banking your own personalized stem cell lines and using them not just as cells, because in most cases cells themselves don't work. We'll integrate that with other exponential technologies like 3D printing. That's already being applied in some arenas, like making trachea or prosthetic limbs. Where this can go in the future is basically making your own set of personalized ink and generating 3D printed organs, essentially. That's sort of the work that several groups are working on at early stages. Again, ink replaced with cells, enabling designer blood vessels. So I think by looking at where trends are heading in healthcare, looking at how quickly innovation is happening, miniaturization, decentralization, we can imagine and see where the puck is going and reinvent healthcare in new ways, particularly applying lessons from other industries, whether it's aviation, IT, energy. I think we can be quite powerful. And I was just at the NIH the other day and presented to Francis Collins this concept of now combining all these data sets in smart ways, funding that, getting some of those silos removed, and providing an integrated new world of medicine. And I think this can enable you as an individual and as a patient, empower the clinical endeavor, improve outcomes at lower costs. And what I really see in closing the future of healthcare is instead of one of phase or sort of stage 3 and 4 medicine, where we diagnose disease late and it's often incurable, we'll move to one which is much more stage 0 medicine, because the best way to, I think, to treat disease is to prevent it. So with that, I'll say thanks.
All right, thanks a lot, Daniel. I think with a lot of these ideas, who needs doctors in the future? So just in the last 6 to 9 months or so, we've taken a very serious look at this area and have already invested in some 7 or 8 different companies that are doing very early stages of work in this area. So just as a quick poll around the room, who in the audience here is working on something either on the FutureMed space, big data space, bioinformatics, and so forth? Just a show of hands really quickly. Okay, great. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about the various aspects, you have some other folks that you can work with. So